So there's two basic ascending techniques. One is for overhanging terrain and one is for low angle terrain. Now on overhanging terrain, what I like to do is just have one aider on the bottom and just take off the top aider. This is for if there's a free hanging rope or you're going to spend almost all your time completely hanging in space. I then put my left foot in about the height so that when you stand in it, the bottom Jumar is at your waist. On these aiders, that's the third step. On most HRIAs, it's the second step. You got to mess around to figure out what the right setup is, but in general, when you stand on it, the top of the ascender should be about at your waist. Again, with the top Jumar, you want it so that when you reach up to it, there's still this slight bend. If you're at all maxed out, you're going to be putting way too much strain on your arm, and after a while, your arm's going to get totally beat up. The basic technique, now you have to imagine this is an overhanging wall, is you just go up with your left foot, hang on the daisy, up with the left foot. The reason I am not using my right foot for this technique is on overhanging terrain, I found whenever you have an aider up here, you spend way too much energy trying to coordinate the 2 feet. In addition, with this setup, it's very lightweight. And when you're pushing up the ascender, it sort of makes a difference. If you throw in this aider and you're now pushing it up and down, it adds in a bit of weight, adds in a bit of cluster. I always like to keep things as simple and light as possible. So that's what you do for overhanging terrain. Now I'm going to move on to the technique that you use for vertical and lower angle terrain. Now this is what you're usually doing when you're following. The only time you're doing the overhanging is usually when it's just an insanely steep route on the east side of El Cap, or if you're Jumaring a free hanging rope after fixing pitches or you're the third person. So usually, you know, you're climbing the nose, you're almost always on terrain that's either vertical or low angle. The technique you do here, again, it's really important to get your feet in just the right spot in the aiders. Your left foot or your bottom foot, if you're right-handed like I am, should be in these Yates aiders. It's on the third step. In most HRIAs, it's in the second step. The important thing is when you stand on it, your ascender, the top of it, is about at your waist. Your right foot is then going to go one step lower. Now, the key thing when you're on low angle terrain is you want to keep as much weight on your feet as possible. So sometimes you can lengthen the daisy chain a little. I usually just leave it the same, but you want to always lean as much as you can over the rope. Sometimes this almost means kind of hugging the rope. The biggest mistake I see is people who kind of stay way out here. As soon as your body's way out here, you're putting all this strain on your arm. You want to get your weight over your feet so that everything's on your feet. You then just kind of start walking up the rope, alternating weight from foot to foot. At first, it's a little awkward. It's especially awkward to kind of keep your feet in the aiders. They seem to kind of want to fall out. You just practice it, and over time you get real familiar with it. You don't want to use contraptions that keep your feet restrained in the aider, because although they do solve the problem at first of your foot coming out, they cause a different problem of more managing and dealing, and in the long run it just makes more sense to be able to have the freedom to have your foot in and out. So you're alternating up and down, and you're keeping your weight right over the rope, and I'll give a demonstration of what it should look like eventually. So another thing, when you're starting off the ground like I am, at first there's not going to be enough weight on this bottom ascender, so that when you lift up the Jumar, sometimes you're just going to lift it up and the rope's not going to pass through. So at first, what you often have to do is manually open the ascender to allow the ascender to go up the rope. So you just got to get used to that. Each ascending device is a little different, but here you just put your thumb on this little lever and it goes up. So until there's enough weight hanging down, which usually takes about 10 or 15 feet, you got to manually do that with your finger. Once you get comfortable doing this, it should almost be like you're running up the rock. Again, you just lean all the way forward and you're just going to alternate back and forth.